Hey folks, Luke from the Broken Meeple, and today it's Pharaon from Catch Up Games. This was also distributed by Black Rock Games. You may have seen them more often than Catch Up Games. This one is kind of what you could almost consider an abstract game, but more like an abstract point salad. It's kind of hard to describe. Essentially, you're all building up towards your eventual burial as an Egyptian pharaoh, as they do. And even though that is what the setting is, you can pretty much disregard all theme from this point on. It really has none of it whatsoever, apart from just aesthetics. But what you do is that you have these actions around a huge frame board with a spinning dial in the middle. And the idea is that each of those separate boards, of which I believe there are 5, is basically a different action, and it can be gain noble cards for points and special abilities. It can be gain bonus artisan cards for extra resources. It can be leveling up on several tracks in order to get points and other resources. It's a very much a resource management point salad game at the end of the day. But as well as these actions, they have a cost. And the cost is built into each action separately, and the frame is built randomly at the start of the game. You can piece it together however you like. But also, the entry cost of every action is based on that middle dial, which spins around every round. So, on one round it may cost you a green to go into this space that also costs a red and a blue, for example. But then if the entry cost is the same as the cost of the actions, let's say the action costs red, blue and a yellow, and the entry cost is a yellow, the yellow entry cost contributes to the action as well. So you only have to pay 3 resources and not 4 in that case. It sounds a bit harder to explain than it actually is, but it's a relatively simple concept. And all you do each round is you take it in turns to perform an action, of which there are limited spaces for each action until everybody has passed. But if you pass, you move along on this track on the side, and depending on how long it takes for other players to finish their turns, you get little bonuses as time goes on. You carry on in this fashion for 5 separate rounds, gaining jars for resources, doing these actions, getting cards, trying to fulfill in-game bonuses. As I say, it's all about victory points at the end of the day. Until 5 rounds are done, you total up all these different areas for points, and of course, one with the most wins. Of course! As rules go, this is actually a fairly light game. I mean, this is not something I would throw in front of a gateway gamer. I'd say it's not gateway gamer friendly because the choices you've got to make are quite tight and tense a lot of the time. But certainly as a next step, you could throw this one in pretty well. It takes about an hour unless you've got some AP prone players with four of you playing, but typically it shouldn't take more than an hour. It even has a solo mode, a bit more on that later, and it's generally a fairly simple game to get into. Doesn't take long to absorb the rules, doesn't take too long to teach it. The rounds are rinse repeat, so it's not like you have a special rule for the second round or anything like that. It's like, nope, if you got one round, you know what to do for round 2, 3, 4 and 5. It flows very nicely, doesn't feel clunky at all, it's just smooth and elegant. And even though the theme is non-existent, I mean, yes, okay, you've got a track that's called the River Niles, and you've got another track that's your burial chamber, but apart from that, it really could be any setting or theme you want. It's just one that they've used for this. Now, that aside, aesthetically, wow. So, I mean, the artwork in this is not exactly something to write home about. It's quite it looks fairly dry. It is a dry abstract at the end of the day. But production quality aside, whew, that's a good one, because the artwork is nothing to sing home about. As I said, it looks fairly generic artwork, but you get a lot in this box for the money. I mean, the frame board, I'll do it more justice on the photos, but it's quite big. There's a lot of these boards, 5 of these boards that are just huge. You randomize it each time and they're very clear. The graphic design is pretty much perfect in terms of trying to understand what's what and everything. There's nothing on there that looks ambiguous or like, huh, what does that mean? You've then got, solo tiles. You've got these very thick ones that are double-sided. You've got jar tokens. You've got all these resource tokens, which are, all the different colors, and they're not only double-sided, but they're also very thick. I mean, these are thick cardboard tiles. It all just feels like one giant deluxe game for a retail edition. This is something that I would expect to see on Kickstarter going, oh, here's your basic version if you don't want to pay as much money, and here's the deluxe version with all these upgraded components. No, this one just decided to give you the upgraded version off the bat. Kudos. We need a bit more of that. It is starting to get a little bit crazy with the whole, oh, you want a game that looks how it should do? Well, pay us extra money. It's like, No, here it is, how we want it to look, and I'm not going to complain about that. So in terms of aesthetics, quality, and time length and ease of play, so far doing pretty well. So how does the gameplay fare? Again, pretty good actually. As I mentioned, it's quite tense and tight with the decision making. Now, with more players, it can drag on a bit, not just from downtime, but also just the game length, because I said an hour. I've seen it go longer than an hour quite frequently with 4 players, but 3 players works pretty well. 2 players very good, because spaces block up as not like a neutral player, but depending on what you don't select from the starting resources and around you, end up with block spaces. So 2 player works very quick and very fast, and the solo mode in particular, is a really good sense of gameplay. But again, more on that a bit later. With the gameplay itself, decisions are just tense as all get out because you've only got a limited amount of spaces for each action around that board. People are likely to take cards and tiles that you want. And you can't directly interact with other players in a sense, like, oh, I can mess up your tableau or I can block you from getting this and that. It's more that by taking up spaces on the board or taking certain cards, you're denying what opponents have. And I know that's kind of similar to most worker placement games, for example. It's like the interaction is kind of indirect, but it happens more frequently here. You get times in other games where it's like, oh, you might block me, but I can get around it. It's not that big of a problem. Here though, everyone's fighting for those spots. You might want to get in quick if you want those particular actions. And you need to forward plan because that spinning dial that goes round with the entry costs on it, 1 minute your thing's going to need an extra blue and it's like, well, that's not quite the same. But hang on, next time it goes to a yellow. And now suddenly I can get a slightly cheaper action. So maybe I'll save that for next round. It's all those little considerations you've got to make, as well as some endgame scoring potential, like these, I'll try to find some example, but when you put 2 frames together, they make a pillar in the middle, a bit like this, whoever this dude is here at the front. And to get the scoring bonus, you need to satisfy both conditions. Well, you need to factor that into your plan. And what are you going to do in the game? Are you going to focus on the burial chamber? Are you going to focus on artisans? Are you going to focus on nobles? And I've seen points come very close. We're talking less than 20-point differential between top and 4th place. And that's with 4 players, with the highest coming up to about 140 or so. So you tend to score somewhere between 100 to 150 in most games. Less if you've got less players, or certainly less if you've got against the AI. But you're still talking about 20-point differential between top and bottom. So they can be quite tight. You might sort of go, well, I reckon he's going to win, but people have tried to guess that before and they've been wrong. So you can't always call the winner, but certainly you can call whoever's likely to lose because you can kind of see, they're running out of resources, they haven't scored very much in this, they haven't got many of the endgame bonuses, so you kind of can call yourself out of the running fairly soon, but calling the winner is a different story. The actions themselves, they are quite generic actions. I mean, it's leveling up tracks and collecting cards that get you little resources or more points. It is a very dry point salad at the end of the day, which is why it's not something I would want to sort of go, right, I've played it, now let's play it directly straight away. But it's one that I would certainly want to pull out quite often, every now and again, to sort of go, you know what, I need a 60-minute easy abstract game that everybody can get into. And because it's so big with good graphic design, nobody has a problem seeing what's what. It's even colorblind friendly to an extent because the different colors have got a symbol associated with each one. So even a colorblind person can potentially get into this. The aspect of passing on this track I quite like as well, because depending on how early you pass, you either become start player for next round, but you kind of want to think, if I pass really early on this round because I'm not fussed until next round, then I can get a bunch of free resources and stuff because they're going to take forever to do their turn. And as soon as somebody does pass, everybody else suddenly feels pressured because they're like, oh, I better finish what I'm doing quick because they're just going to rake in all this freebie stuff without any notice. And you may think, well, they don't get points by doing that. No, but resources are tight. The different colors, the fact that you need so many of them for certain actions, it's tight. It's not a free-flowing game. You can easily put yourself in a corner if you're not careful. This is something that you would kind of expect in most heavier Euros, but to have it in a fairly light Euro is, pretty good going for anybody who likes tight, fisted gameplay in a sense. And certainly if people are blocking your actions, it can really cause you problems in the long run. So, you know, all in all, multiplayer, pretty sound. Better with less players, I think, than the maximum 4, but it scales pretty well regardless. I mean, you know, what spaces are available on the board and that, you know, get used up. So it works fine with 2, 3, and 4. It's purely down to how much time you want to spend playing a game, really. However, I gotta mention before I wrap this up, the solo mode. Because I would actually dare say the solo mode is the best part of this game.
This is why Superman works alone.
With this mode, effectively, you have these 5 tiles down the bottom, and you can flip them over from coloured to dark, you know, depending on whether you want easier or harder modes, and you can do it randomly. You put a different resource at the bottom, and the idea is that they use the jars, which have pre-printed resources on them, to dictate its turn. So the bottom of the 3 resources has to go on these boards, and it triggers an action. The top 2, you decide one to go on the action board and one to clog up a space on the board. So you've got some ways to manipulate the AI, providing their space is available. And you're looking on these boards to see, well, if I give him a blue, then he's going to end up getting that, and that's going to screw me over a bit. So maybe I'll put the blue on the board, but then that's clogging up the space. I don't want him to do that. You've got a lot of decisions to make, not just with your own gameplay, but what you do with the AI. And this elevates it up a lot against a lot of other solo modes, because a lot of the solo modes you find the AI is pre-programmed. Flip a card, it just does what it does, and there's a tiebreaker rule, and it's like job done. You don't get to influence a lot of what the AI does. This time, you do. You can see what potential actions the AI can have. You can also make a choice when the jar flips to say, right, well, I don't want to give you the yellow. You're gonna take that red anyway, so I can't stop you there. But I can take the yellow and give you the blue, because the blue gives you a worse action, whereas the yellow, I'm not fussed if it stays on the board. And you're doing that every time the AI takes a turn. Aside from that, the solo mode plays essentially like a 2-player game, and you just try to beat the AI on points. But it's very smooth, very quick. You'll get it done in less than an hour as normal. And depending on how many of these you want to flip over, you've got a ton of variety and a ton of difficulty, you know, a ton of difficulty ratings, and just generally a good, solid AI. I dare say better than multiplayer. So, all in all, this is a pretty solid game. It's not one that I think's going to sort of top my charts in the sense of like, oh yeah, I'm really thinking about playing this game. You know, I really want to get home and play this game. It's not quite that level, but I think this is going to appeal to a lot of people. It's light enough for game cafes. It's thinky enough for, you know, gamers who want to have something quite meaty in a short space of time. It looks the business. The artwork is clear. The graphic design is perfection. You know, I mean, you got a reference guide at the back for the nobles, but that doesn't take that long. It's just one sheet. The rules are generally straightforward. It is well produced as all get out. It's not even that expensive a game, really. I mean, it's not the cheapest thing in the world, no, but it's about the same as any other game, and yet you get some good quality components, jars, and everything. It's pretty solid all round. So, you know, this one, Pharaon, I'm going to give this a solid 8 out of 10. I think this is definitely one to check out. I think this is going to fly under the radar. I'm a little bit afraid that might happen, but honestly, I think if you're into this sort of, you know, fairly thinky abstract games that are done within a short space of time, if you don't care about theme, particularly if theme is of no interest to you whatsoever, you just want a light point salad that, you know, will get tense and tight decisions and has a solo mode, then check out Pharaon. I think it's a pretty solid game all round. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review, and regardless of whether you've buried me in my Egyptian chamber a little bit earlier than I wanted to, it's still only a game. Take care. I'll see you on the next video.